Okay. Checking to see if we're live. We are live, I think. Nice. Just gotta be watching it. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, sorta. I mean, it depends, right? Because streamers are really good when it comes to speaking about things, because like they're used to to being in front of people, but at the same time they're yeah, I don't really see, like at the same time it's sorta, yeah. Okay, yeah, we're going good. I'm just gonna yeah keep that on tabs. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Mad ISK. It is I, that wormholer, by the way. Joining me today is the one, the only, Lokoval the Nub. It's been a long time. It's been a long time. The last Mad ISK was December. We were doing the decade wrap up, which actually got really great positive responses, so I like that. But it has been far too long since then. Uh, Unfortunately, because I just am bad at keeping up with things. But nevertheless, we are here now. There's no desktop audio. There's no desktop audio. They haven't been able to hear you this entire time.
Woohoo!
Yay. Yeah, so there's Lokoval. All right, cool. But yeah, so 3 months.
That whole 3 seconds without my sultry voice. Not Earth sultry, but sultry in its own.
Oh, absolutely. That's another person we need to get on. Anyway. So, you know what? Ah, we'll talk about it later. So, Madisk episode 4? Episode 4. Mad Abyss. Wow. Yeah, episode 4, Mad Frigate Abyss, to be more specific. Lokoval here is actually I guess we can call him a expert in Frigate Abyss.
Well, probably is as about as much of an expert as we'll largely find. There are some people that triple box abyssals, but besides probably myself and Hateless, I know there's a few more out there, but there are not a ton.
Yeah, that is true. And I mean, as I say expert as the Abyss allows us to be.
Yeah, because I'm still learning stuff in there too. I will get into
Absolutely. Um so anyway, so yeah, we're going to be going over all the different aspects of the Abyss. Um this is the first time I've done Abyss on the show, so I guess we'll just go over the whole Abyss. That way we can actually like lead into it pretty well. Um So, but first, Lokoval, just tell me a little bit about yourself and what do you do on Twitch here?
All right, so I'm a streamer. I've been around for a little bit. Originally, I came in and I made the character local enough to show people how to do things as a brand new character. I'd say alpha, but there weren't alphas and omegas at the time. Then I started getting into faction warfare. I did that for a while on stream, which if you do faction warfare missioning in cruisers, it usually ended up in occasionally me blowing up in a great big fireball simply because I was getting shot on stream, which happens. And then Abyssals came out, and I went headfirst into Abyssals, and I almost live in an Abyssal dead space now, but like just 15 minutes at a time.
Quite a transition, but I suppose one transitions pretty easily to the other. I mean, as we've been hearing from so many people, the Abyss does a really good job at keeping your fundamentals sharp. So going back to faction warfare doesn't sound like a terrible thing to do, especially now with the new update coming. This is being recorded on, I believe it's March 19th. So
Uh, yeah, the update coming on the 24th does sound fairly interesting. But when you're already used to dying, going into something where you're probably going to die isn't that big of an.
yeah, that's fair. So let's get into this. So let's start with the bare bones basics. What is the Abyss?
Okay, so the Abyss is this magical place. You have to use a filament to get in. There are 25 different filaments to get into the Abyss, 5 different weather types. We say weather, but it's space weather. And then 5 tiers. So the 5 different tiers, 1 through 5, are calm, agitated, fierce, raging, and chaotic. And then the different types, which I totally did not bring up at all, are, and I didn't, electrical, exotic, gamma, dark, and firestorm. Each of the different types of abyss have their own little quirks to it. So firestorm gives you a 50% armor buff, but it also gives you a minus, depending on your difficulty, up to 70%, 70 or 80, anyway, 70 or 80% negative to your thermal resistances. But it also does it for everything else in the abyss too. So all the rats have more armor, but less thermal resist.
That's actually a good point. Let me pull up the what is it? The abyssal the informational chart, like the brain dump chart that tells you like all the rat statistics and all that, because that's an important
Oh,
chart.
that I may not have looked at that, but that's definitely important.
Yeah,
Here, I was just going to link you the Abyss Tracker, which I'm still going to do.
the Abyss Tracker is also a very good tool for this. Yeah, there you go. Um, but yeah, so like there are, so each weather has its bonuses and its boons and debuffs. You choose which one you want to go into depending on what ship you have and what you want to go after. Each one also has a leniency towards very specific, um, I guess, loot tables. Uh, that's not to say that there are some that are permalocked. At least I don't think there are, aside from mutaplasmids. Um, but even then, they're kind of thrown all over the place.
Yeah, mutaplasmids, even though so there is loot locked not to specific abysses. Well, okay, yes, kind of no. So, for example, darks will drop crystalline isogen. They will never drop 0 point condensate, except for those little bonus cans that you get, or if you get the staging room in a tier 5. If you're in tier 1 to 4, the bonus cans, which don't give you a ton, can give you some 0 point condensate. But otherwise, you're only getting crystalline isogen as your main drop in those. Firestorm's the opposite. You get all 0 point condensate and no crystalline isogen. Again, same limitations. The exception to this is electrical, where you do get a little bit of both. And electrical will give you the cat mutaplasmids, firestorms give you the armor mutaplasmids, gamma gives you the shield mutaplasmids, exotics give you, I want to say those are the warp scram warp disruptor mutaplasmids, and I'm missing one.
Exotics give you tackle.
Exotics.
Exotics
Okay,
give
so exotics give
tackle,
you tackle, and gamma gives you must be shield. I
shield,
must miss
shield. Yeah,
shield.
yeah. So it according to the abyssal dead space like little brain dump sheet. Gamma is shield, dark matter is propulsion, plasma is armor, electrical energy, and exotic is tackle. Um, and yeah, so these range from levels decayed to unstable, but we'll get into those. Yeah, so the penalties are up to 70%, yes, in chaotics. So
However, a lot. So that's 70. That's not 70 off of whatever you go into it with. I go in with my Nurgles, and they start off with probably in around 90. But because of all the bonuses and stuff they have, that 70 comes off the bonuses, not off of whatever that number is. So you don't go in with 80 and you drop down to 30. I go in with like 90 and I drop down to 82. It's still my highest resist going into firestorms.
Yeah. So one of the things I've noted is it's not it's not like, because when people look at it, they think that the resistance is as a percentage, and then they see the percentage reduction in the abyss, so it's like minus 70%. So like 80% resistance minus 70% resistance equals 10% resistance. No, it's actually, what is 70% of 80%? So what is 70% of 80? That is your actual resistance number then. So there's still some resistances there. So it's one of those very tiny, like, strange quirks about the abyss. But so you have you have your five storms, you have your five different levels of filaments, uh, and you use a different ship to enter each one. And there's certain bonuses at the end. What are these? I guess we should talk about the loot then that you get out of them. The most basic being the crystal isogen and the 0 point condensate. What are those used for?
Even more basic than that are the
Mm-hmm.
survey databases.
The red loot.
The survey databases, especially when you start getting up to the higher tiers, is your biggest amount of cash you're pulling out of the abyss. Now, if you're doing tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, you're not going to see a whole lot of the isogen or the ZPC or the surveys. You're going to mostly be aiming to try get those golden skill books. We'll talk about those in a minute. But once you start getting to higher tiers, most of what you tend to pull out is going to be crafting materials and survey databases. The survey databases are, like you said, they're the red loot. You can sell them for 100,000 a piece to NPC uh, market guys. Yeah, that was great. No, you can sell them for as red loot for 100,000 a piece to Concord, and it's guaranteed ISK. So no matter how terrible everything tanks in the abyss, these survey databases are always going to be worth the same amount of ISK unless it's nerfed by CCP.
Yeah, for those who have ever ran in wormholes, it's basically just an equivalent blue loot. Um, there's no difference between the two, other than there is only one type of Triglavian survey database, which gives 100,000 ISK, as opposed to blue loot, where there are varying difference ranging from 100,000 up to millions of ISK per blue loot type. But yeah,
And
so
the only other difference with that too is that in filaments, it's randomized, where in wormholes it's
yeah, it's static. That's true. Hell, I mean, I've gotten databases out of the gathering nodes, so it's, I mean, it can be weird. But that's the abyss. So the material, but there's one more that we haven't talked about as far as the loot is concerned, and that's blueprints.
well, we're going to go into the 0 point condensate and the isogen because that's going to tie into the blueprints
Okay.
nicely anyway. So the blueprints are obviously used to build the Triglavian things. These ships coming out, they had a little bit of a slow start, but they're very quickly gaining a lot of things. I haven't actually checked for level 4 missions yet for burners, but I suspect bringing 2 Nurgles into a burner might end up, destroying pretty well any burner without having to change ship types quite as often. I haven't looked at it yet. I'm hoping somebody else does because I don't do missions.
That's a
But
discussion with Hateless,
just the
man.
amount of, yeah, it would be a great discussion with Hateless. But the
Mm-hmm.
amount of tank plus you could remote rep, plus those are longer fights, and Triglavian ships do fantastic in longer fights. Actually, I can use an Abyss example for this because I use Nurgles in Tier 5 Firestorms when I go up against battleships. My 3 ships can hit 2,500 DPS with 3 frigates.
That's a lot.
That's a lot for 3 frigates. I'm almost want to take them out and shoot people, but I don't want to talk about that too much in case I do decide to. Because you can't get a lot of things this small to that high of a DPS and still have it good at other things. Usually you have to sacrifice tank, you have to sacrifice this, you have to sacrifice that. These ramp up amazingly well, but it takes time to get there. So you're not going to want to use them in most missions where you shoot something, it pops, you shoot something else. No, you have to have a target and keep shooting at it. So I got away a little bit. I was just talking about the ships. However, what we're going to talk about is blueprints. So some of the blueprints drop in such high quantities that they are worthless. Other ones drop in lower quantities and are not so much. The ship blueprints have been doing extremely well, except for the remote rep ship. Apparently, nobody likes being Logi ever. That's not really a big surprise. Most people like blowing stuff up. However, the frigate is still pretty cheap. The Kikimora apparently hit a doctrine, and it spiked from about 50 million a pop to 110 at the lowest last I checked.
Yeah, the blueprints are up
And the
from like,
blueprint went up to 70, 80 million
yeah,
apiece.
exactly. Yeah, it's
Vedmax were sitting around 20, Drekovic's around 15, Leshik's around 40 last I checked. The Velis have been in the 40 to 60 range a lot of the time. Those are the faction guns, which are fantastic. The radiation sinks, I think, have been going down a little bit. They're more around 7, 8. They were 10 to 12 before. However, that's a lot of different blueprints that you get from the Abyss that is worth something. Unfortunately, all of the guns are lower, all the ammo is lower. They drop in such quantities that there's no way we pull enough ZPC, zero point condensate, and crystalline isogen to actually build all of them.
Yep, I mean it's a choice. So this is one of those cost benefit analysis types. You have to choose, what you're going to build at what for what reasons, whatever reason it might be. And all these prices are again as of March 19th, 2020 at the time of recording, basically.
Also, there are a bunch of blueprints that look like they should be useful for something, however, they're not. And those are the meta blueprints. So if you can't use them to make Tech 2 variants, then the blueprints tend to be worth just about nothing. If you were to make, for example, a heavy compact entropic disintegrator, you would lose ISK from making it instead of you wouldn't even come close.
I would say that the only time that they're useful is if you're using it personally and you just have to have those fitting reductions. And you just can't afford to be using a faction weapon. That's
That
such
would be
a
the only.
niche.
But at that point in time, you're better off selling the materials and buying,
Yeah.
because right now you would lose 10 to 20 million just building it itself. You can sell the stuff and buy it, and it would be.
Yeah. That is true. So it's just one of those things. So we talked about the different kinds of abyss. We talked about the different filaments. We talked about the loot that you get out of it. And I guess the next step would be, I guess the next stage. So we've explained Abyss, and normally Abyss is running cruisers, uh, solo, but Lokoval here does it just a little bit differently. I'm gonna let him explain the details of it, but it's Frigate Abyss, and Frigate Abyss is very different.
So Frigate Abyss is very different. However, it has a lot of similarities in a fair number of ways. So when CCP came out with Frigate Abyss, I saw it and I'm like, I want to triple box that. This is going to be terrible. I'm going to love it. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. They came out and said you can run Abyss in 3 frigates instead of a cruiser, and you'll get 3 times the loot. And you can actually see how you get 3 times the loot, because it doesn't drop the isogen or the zero point condensate or the survey databases in a single stack when you blow up the biocache. It drops them in separate stacks. You can see how it's tripled. It's kind of neat that way. But so I saw it and I'm like, okay, this is what I want to run. How am I going to run it? I bet worms would work great for this. Side note: worms are terrible for this. Do not do worms. The Gila is the most popular cruiser for running abyssals for good reason. It has an amazing tank. The reason the Gila has an amazing tank is because of its 20% bonus, and it has enough mid slots to give it a good tank. The Worm is not in this category. So then I looked at what else I could do, and I ended up going to Hawks. I can't remember why I went to Hawks. This was quite a while ago. However, I went to Hawks, and one of the reasons I did is because darks were the cheapest filament you could run. Now, darks, you want to use missiles, and it's funny because this was the cheapest filament. It was considered one of the hardest to run filaments because everyone was using Gilas. Gilas are easy mode. Not a lot of people had gotten into the missile cruisers yet. But darks have a weird benefit of if you're flying a missile boat without drones, you don't get a negative buff to the sight because the two parts to it are you get 50% speed and you get minus 50% to your optimal and fall off ranges. Missiles don't have optimal fall off ranges. They're not effective.
Yeah, missiles, to clarify, have flight time and speed.
So I started doing tier 4. I blew a whole lot of ISK on skill injectors to get two characters up to decent Hawks. And it worked. I started running tier 4 Hawks. It started going really well. I made a lot of bank on running darks. And then eventually, after streaming them for so long and other people realizing, hey, you know what? Darks might not be too bad. The stupid price of darks spiked to 20 million apiece.
Yep. That did happen.
So I ran tier 5 for a long time. It did really well. It made buckets upon buckets of ISK. On a bad day, I was getting 1 billion ISK per hour.
Yeah, so this is where I think there's like a little bit of differentiation to be made in that in the last Madisk talks that I've had, I had Hateless who multi-boxes burner missions, but that can totally be done solo. There's no need to multi-box it. Ash, we had invasions and emerging conduits on, which again totally soloable. I mean, until emergent conduit nerf, but I mean that sucks. So that look for episode 2 of Madisk for the relevancy to that. But this is different. You have to be multi-boxing if you want to be able to do this quote unquote solo.
Yes, no. So one thing I've come to the realization is if you want to run Frigate Abyss solo, you have to obviously you have to run multiple accounts. You can do a single frigate in up to tier 2s. You can do dual frigates in up to tier 3s, and you can do 3 frigates in up to tier 5s. Now, that being said, there are exceptions. You can potentially take 2 frigates into a tier 5, and if you get actually you could take 1 frigate into a tier 5, and if you got the perfect rooms, you can technically clear it. That does not mean it's reliable, so I don't really look at it that way. Same as I can take an assault frigate, one of them, into a tier 2 and clear it. That doesn't mean that this guy who just started the game 5 days ago can do the same thing, even if he's injected a little bit into it.
Yeah, so that's definitely one of those things. I mean, solo. So, I believe the Convocation of Imperium, like, will just throw Kestrels and Punishers at people so that they can learn the Frigate Abyss because those can solo T1.
Actually, so I've been working. Well, I'm in Malraux and Convocations, so I've been working on a little bit of something with Fonsui actually, and it's hilarious. Actually, let me grab the link for it right quick before I talk. All right, so Fonsui made a fit and gave it to me, and he's like, "Loki, I want you to try this out." And I'm like, "Okay, this looks absolutely terrible. I'm in." And I went and bought 30 of them, and we call it cheese bills. And it with good skills. It's a 160 DPS hook bill, and we have found out that, and it's 23 million ISK. Now, to a brand new player, 23 million ISK is still a decent amount of ISK. To me, I throw this at people and tell them to go and lose these in the abyss. It's a lot of fun. We found out that with 3 good characters, you can run up tier 4 abyss with 3 of these 23 million ISK hook bills, and they're generally paid off in 1 to 2 abyssal sites. All 3 of them are paid off in 1 to 2 sites.
That's crazy. So this is actually was going to be my next point. So we here on I know there's a lot of people who are just like, it's not about ISK per hour, it's about fun per hour, or whatever statistic they like to choose. Here at Mad ISK, we care about one thing, and that's profit, growth, and profit. Grofit. So
Well, needless to say,
so this
yes, it's about fun per hour. Some people enjoy making buckets of ISK as their fun.
that's true. That's true. So this was going to be my next point is I like to one of the things that I like to do is be like, is there an alpha solution to this? If no, what is the lowest level we can possibly go? Because I don't want there to be I want to understand the very floor, like what is the base level that you can use to get into this? And it looks like this hook bill is it, right? I mean, yes, you can take the Punishers into T1s, you can take them into T2s if you have 3 of them, fine. But T3s is when things really start getting, I should say, sustainable.
So actually, that's a really really good point. I haven't played with alphas yet. That's something I want to do. I haven't gotten there yet. Um, but the abyss is not very alpha friendly in any kind of way. And up until I got this fit from Fonsui, I was thinking that alphas, what, you should completely stay out of the abyss. It is not a place for you. However, now I have this fit, and I know this fit can run tier 4 darks with people who are skilled. Now, obviously, alphas aren't skilled. However, they should be able to get pretty well all the hook bill skills up to fairly good to be able to at least run tier 3s in this, which even at tier 3s, we were paying it off in 2 sets of filaments easily. 4s, usually it was 1. So this now the only issue there is you can only run 1 alpha. So 3 people have to get alphas together or with an omega to be able to run this fit together. That's actually a much harder part of all of this.
Yeah, the teamwork bit.
Because I've been running Team Abyssals for a couple months. I'm starting to back off on it a little bit. I'm probably gonna do some of it. I'm still going to be doing some of it, but I'm putting it a little bit on the back burner because I've run it for 2 months and I've gotten some decent amounts of people and a decent interest. But at the same time, I still usually have the same 2, 3 people every time I run them that are the ones that want to go. There's nothing wrong with that, except that in 2 months I've managed to grow it 3 people.
Yeah, this is so. I mean, so the point that I was trying to make with the having to run these just 3 characters is this is not something that you do as a brand new player. This is at least the way that we're speaking about it in this context is far more of a mid. I'm gonna say like a mid-level player, somebody who's just starting to get maybe their second or third account together, and is looking to do something as a multi-boxer now, as opposed to a singular entity player, which many people play as. But once you start getting above there, this is what I was referring to. So yeah, but so when it comes to like this hook bill can definitely do 3 and 4s. I guess darks.
It's short on 5s for DPS. We definitely tested that one, and blew up. The funnier thing about it though was that the cost of 3 filaments to get into the chaotic dark was over the cost of 2 of the hook bills we took in.
Yeah.
Because it's about 19 million per chaotic dark right now. These hook bills and you need 3 of them to go in with frigates. That's the thing about frigate abyss. It uses 3 times the filaments. So it cost 57 million to go in with 70 million worth of ship.
Yeah. So there is something to be said about that, where we're specifically talking about hook bells for darks. So when it comes, so let's just now that we're on the subject of fitting, let's talk about ships real quick. So we have the hook bell for darks. We have the hawk for darks. That's almost like the bread and butter now. Now the other filaments, I understand retribution in electricals is godlike. Um, so have there been people? Have you tested other ships for other filaments, or do we just know about hawks and retributions in T5? Uh, Dark
So
and
the one that
electrical,
I'm
respectively.
currently running is Nurgles in Firestorms, and I've also run them in Gammas, but on a much smaller scale. So after Darks got stupid expensive, I'm like, okay, I want to try find a way to get into a cheaper filament. And the cheapest filament at the time, of course, was Firestorm. Darks became a much easier one and was no longer the most difficult. Firestorm was still what was considered to be a more difficult filament. So I'm like, yes, let's go for that one. And at first, I put together 3 retributions. I'm like, okay, retributions do EM thermal damage. I've heard they can do these before. Let's give it a go. I gave it a go and I died a terrible death.
So the retributions didn't work.
They didn't work for me. That's not to say that retributions cannot be used for that. That's saying that I didn't get them to work. So I'm like, okay, let's go with 2 retributions and a deacon. That also failed miserably. What would happen to me in those? Again, this is to me, doesn't mean it'll happen to you. If you have it working, you have done better than me on that part. But for the deacon, what would happen is I would get occasionally, not all the time, but more often than I cared for, 3 or 4 Harrowing Vedmax. And one thing about Frigate Abyss is the Harrowing Vedmax like to all switch to the same target. So if they would start shooting my deacon would end up, they would ramp up, they would kill the deacon wouldn't have enough reps, and he would die a terrible death.
So you were running the, I guess one of the more common dual DPS single logi builds that
Yes.
that a lot of people. I shouldn't say build because build is like fitting. I should say
Composition?
composition or strategy or layout or yeah. So you're running the 2 DPS one logi comp, and that didn't go well with the firestorms.
That didn't work out for me. So
Hmm.
then Nurgle was still a reasonably new thing. Not a lot of people had been using it at that point. And Ash Tarothi over in Malora had mentioned that he wanted to see more uses for Nurgles. I'm like, you know what? Let's give Nurgles a try. And I went in and they did fantastic. And then
Triglavians, man, king of the spider tank.
they are absolutely king of the spider tank. And on top of that, they're Triglavians. So when we look at races, all of the races have generally built up their resistances against themselves because for so long they fought against themselves. Or at least that's how I remember it at this moment, and then I'm going to look it up and it's going to be completely wrong.
Well, no, yeah, they have built up their so the tech ones
Yeah,
are their
so
general
I'll look at a
setups,
retribution.
right?
Retribution has no, it has terrible EM thermal resists.
Well, so the tech two, right? So the tech twos generally are to resist the opponent's damage types. So Amarian ships tech 2 will resist damage usually, or
So that argument
cover
went
up
out the
the opposite
window.
resist holes almost. You know.
Nurgles have resistances against themselves. So the armor resists for Nurgle is thermal and explosive, and the damage it does is thermal and explosive. So the great thing about it is that these are the 2 big damage types going into the abyss. One of your biggest threats tend to be Nurgles, Damavix, Leshix, or not Nurgles, Damavix, Leshix, Damavix, Vedmax, and Leshix. They do thermal, explosive. Thermal's the higher one, which makes this even better to take into firestorms.
That's interesting. So then so so the triple Nurgle then became the setup.
Triple Nurgle became the setup. And like I said, they have a lot of tank because we're in firestorms and they are armor tanks. They benefit from that 50% buffer, so that one of the biggest threats in the Abyss, which if you've ever gone to the Abyss, you know the most terrifying ship in there is Charybdis Tyrannos, nicknamed Karen. And that ship is the most likely thing to kill you in the Abyss. However, the Nurgle can take a couple shots from it. Running my Hawks and Darks, when I used to do that, they could get one shot in the Abyss and just disintegrate instantly. And you'd be like, what just happened?
Even with the speed bonuses,
Even with the speed bonuses and the negative optimal range,
full spiral,
if
everything.
you
Wow.
bumped into something, if you had the wrong transversal at the wrong second, if there was a tracking tower, if there was a blue cloud, all of these things could make you die. I talked to Hateless one time, and Hateless is against the idea of using an assault damage control in Abyssals. He doesn't want to do it. I'm a little bit of the opposite. I like to put my first character going in with an assault damage control. Hateless calls it a crutch. However, I call it the fudge factor. It stops the fudge factor of if everything goes wrong, I have a chance of living. So I'm going to use the Karen room as an example. You go into a room, you have a Charybdis Tyrannos 70 kilometers away. It is a sniping battleship. It can wreck you that far away easily. Now, the Abyss is an extremely random area. People are like, "Hey, what do you shoot first in the Abyss?" And I'm like, "I really wish I could tell you. Usually it's a web, usually it's a newt. However, it really depends on the composition of what I'm coming in and what is around me." Because when you go into a mission, you have your gate, you have your enemies, you have your other gate that you're going to go to the next area. When you go into an abyss, you go in, you have your enemies, you have blue clouds, you have yellow clouds, you have red clouds, you have towers that give everybody better tracking, you have towers that destroy drones, you have towers that destroy, well, okay, the ones that destroy drones in their defense destroy drones, light missiles, and enemy drones as well. It will destroy some of the enemies that you find in these sites, and all of these things are randomly placed everywhere. So I can go into a Charybdis room and I could be in a blue cloud. The Charybdis can be next to a tracking tower that gives it 80% tracking. There could be four webs and four newts, and I can be almost screwed. But because I have that assault damage control, I have 15 seconds of taking fire from everything in this room, where I might be able to survive it if they start switching targets.
Yeah, and I think this brings up one of the philosophies I like to think about when it comes to gaming in general is there are no crutches. There's only like optimal optimal bonuses for given scenarios. And while some options are optimal in more scenarios than others, there's still uses for different one. There's still like that just because one is not as optimal in multiple scenarios doesn't make it less valuable. And this is I think this is one of those examples where the assault damage control is so powerful because it is the equalizer when it comes to the randomness of the abyss. And yeah, that's just one of those things, you know. And the abyss is
It is
random.
a trade off still.
It
You
is.
have to give up damage to use the assault damage control.
Right, but at the same
I find
time,
it's worth it for that first guy going in because the first guy gets shot by everyone.
yeah. but this is, one of the things is there are always trade-offs, and that's something that the Abyss pushes really well is if you want to do something, you're going to be sacrificing somebody else. And that's the case in a lot of aspects of the Abyss and in some aspects of Eve. It's just you have to accept the different boons and buffs as they come. And one of the things with the Abyss, and the reason why I find it difficult to assist people in the Abyss, is you're telling me, what do I shoot first? I don't know, because I don't know what ship you're flying. I don't know what you're doing. I don't know what you're in. Everything is going to be different. If you're in an electrical, I don't think you need to worry about starvings as much. But if you're in an active fit that may or may not be kept stable, relatively easily, if you're on the, if you're kind of teetering there, then it might be worth going for the starvings. Maybe it's better for the dampeners. Who knows, right? So
It's so much worse than that, though. Like,
I can
you might
imagine in
go
a
into a
friggin' abyss it
room
gets even
and
worse, right?
it's so terrible. I love it. And even then, like, I've been running these a while now, and I keep learning new things. Like, before, and just the difference between what frigate you're running in them makes such a huge difference. So with Hawks, one of the things that I would usually like to take out if I got the Damavik Vedmak room would be the tangling first, so I can keep my speed. And I was doing the same thing with Nurgles until I realized that eventually, at some point in time, I realized that unless there's four of the Harrowing Vedmaks that like to stay on that one target, like I was talking about earlier, that I can turn off my afterburner and I can tank them. And they usually stay in range better if I do that. So all of a sudden, me having my afterburner on or off with tanglings in there didn't matter at all. So I could focus on the starving first. However, again, if you end up with four Harrowing Vedmaks that like to focus, they can sometimes hit you just a tiny bit better. And eventually, when they ramp up, you will run out of health. And if that's the case, you're going to want to take care of those tangling first so you can get speed so they can pop out of range a little bit.
Yeah. But so with that said, now that we're starting to get into the strategy of it all, so we have our ships, right? And one caveat that I attach to the interview with Ash, when talking about invasions, that I will attach here with this interview with Lokoval, and that I will attach to the inevitable cruiser abyss discussion with Von Sui that we will have at some point in the near future, hopefully, is the abyss is subject to change in a way that most current content isn't. We don't know, are changing constantly. Things might be different, and as Lokoval mentioned, he just came up with a Nurgle fit out of nowhere. So new metas, new adjustments, new changes can be coming. Every maybe in the abyss, not every week as with invasions, but every month or so, or every 2 months, somebody will just come up with something and be like, oh, this works now. So the one caveat I'll attach to this is all the information as of March 19th, 2020. This is what we know. This is how we understand things. This is not only subject to change, but evolutions in the meta and in the understanding of the abyss will most likely come. I'm not saying tomorrow, but, if you're watching this 2-3 months, a year from now, 2 years, things may have changed drastically. So keep that in mind when looking at this. So and that's also one of the amazing things about the abyss is that anybody listening to this could be that person that goes out and figures out, hey, you know what, curs, man, turns out these suckers actually might be useful somewhere. And everybody just think of curs. That doesn't make sense at all. Why would you ever use a cur? All of a sudden goes out, does a site, and actually ends up destroying it completely. It came out of nowhere. It's just an example. So
Actually, it's funny you say that. So I linked my Hawk fit that I've used for a very long time in Abyssals. It's done very well. It has made me untold billions of ISK. It's estimated right now. with implants. 721 million is Gingita, and I now hate it. Somebody had told me once upon a time that they can run tier fives in 50 million Cox, and I'm like, you could probably do it, but I haven't seen it. I don't think it would work myself. And now I'm finding out that it can possibly actually work. I'm still really early into this. But the other thing about this hog fit that I just linked is that I'm also not happy with the amount of cap recharge it has, and I'm probably going to change it up and take off a little bit of DPS, because what happens is you can get locked out of cap very easily in the abyss, because you can have, I've seen, I think, up to 13 nuding ships in one site before, and it is the most frightening thing you will ever run into. Most of the time when I have died into abyss, and a lot of times I've seen other people die in the abyss, it's not usually because you don't have the capability of repping. It's usually because you've gotten nuded out, you've lost your hardeners, you've lost your ability to rep. But had you had your ability to rep because you had cap, it wouldn't have been an issue. But you've run out of cap and you just die because there's nothing you can do about it. And that is why the abyss can be frightening.
Yeah. So now we're kind of getting deep into the strategy of it all. Let's talk about the rooms, because while layout and effects and all this can be randomized to a degree, the one thing that is consistent is the rats that you will find in each room. There's a Charybdis room. There's the Overmind room. So um, we let's talk about um, we care about making ISK here. So let's talk about the I guess the tier that you're most familiar with then, because that'll be the one that you understand the rooms of most. So like, because they're of course like quote unquote static spawns in in the abyss. Not all of it is random.
Do you want to go with darks or do you want to go with firestorms? I'm going to, from a free perspective, darks will be hawks, firestorms will be.
Do the rooms change with the
The rooms are always the same. The strategy for the rooms vastly.
Well, let's start with explaining the rooms, and then we can go how to deal with them in each. So let's just explain the rooms first.
All right, perfect. Do we actually have a list of the rooms handy? Let me take a look at that sheet you
Uh,
gave. Oh, actually, yeah.
that's a good question.
No, I've got the types of ships that you can come up to, and that is all I need. So let's go with the ones that frighten me the most in pretty well. Actually, let's go with Karen, which is the Charybdis Tyrannos, the bane of all of the abyss, and you will always hear of people dying to Karen
And I'll
every
repost the
single
link
time.
into chat so you
It
guys
it
can see what we're looking at.
doesn't matter which one you go into, you will always hear of people dying to Charybdis, because Charybdis has such good damage application, and she comes with cruisers every time. And a lot of the cruisers can absolutely, sometimes there'll be nothing frightening at all about them, and other times you'll have webs and newts which will keep you out of her close area, where you want to get up and close and personal with Karen so that she cannot hit you, especially with frigates. However, her cruisers, they may newt you out, they may web you out, and give you a lot more trouble with that. So the first is Charybdis Tyrannos. She will usually come with Scylla Tyrannos or Ephialtes. Now, Ephialtes are much lower hit point ships. They're easy to take care of. They're usually not a problem. They do web and they do newt, but they're not hard. The Scyllas are also not that hard on their own, but they are more tanky. So if you end up with Scylla, it's a little scarier than if you just end up with Ephialtes.
So that's one of the rooms.
So the next room that I'd like to talk about is the Damovic Vedmak. And the Damovic Vedmak room is usually one of the other extremely scary ones, depending on how you're set up. If you can, it's because the Damavix and Vedmax, they all ramp up damage. With frigates, you have a little bit of a benefit where they will switch targets because there's multiple targets. If you're a cruiser, the Vedmax and the Damavix will ramp on you the entire time you're in there. Now, the ramp can be a really big problem. I've had times where I've gone in with my frigates and they've stayed on a single frigate the whole room. I've still beaten it, but it makes it so it's quite a bit of damage. However, again, if they do that, the first guy I go in with has an assault damage control. Not usually a problem. However, it's still scary from time to time. Now, those come with starving, striking, harrowing, anchoring, no, those ones don't have renewing. Those are the Vedmax or the Leshix have renewing and ghosting. So usually my first target will be the tangling, which why do I not see that on there? Triglavian Collective. Are they missing tangling on
So
here?
the this specific image is actually out of date. Um,
Okay. Yeah, so
I'm
tangling
trying to find
is
the
a
most recent
Weber.
one.
Tangling's a Weber. It will slow you down. That's usually my first target. A lot of times you want speed in the Abyss. And if you talk to Ash Tarothi and you go into you talk to Ash and you're like, hey Ash, I died in the Abyss. The first question he's going to ask you is, are you locable? And it's like, no. And then it's like, well, you probably died because you didn't overheat your afterburner. Then you're like, well, I didn't have an afterburner. I had a micro warp drive. And it's like, you died because you didn't overheat your afterburner. You should have an afterburner in most cases. We're starting to challenge that a little bit on him, but again, we're still early into the days of Fonswee's cheese bill, and we're going into cheese hawks as well. That's another story. But I'm really early into that because I'm still learning stuff about this. So usually you want to kill the tangling first. They are only Damavix. Then you'll want to kill the starving. I prefer to kill the starving Damavix first. They steal less cap than the Vedmax, but then they have a much smaller time before they steal more cap on you. So if you start getting low on cap, if a Vedmax grabbing you and you have decent cap regen, you'll regen some in between and be able to pulse mods. But if you have all Damavix on you, they'll have it spread out enough that you just might not get cap back. That's how I lost my Hawk last time in a tier 4, and the Hawks are usually good at running tier 5.
So that's the third room that we've covered then. So how many are there?
Oh, there are a whole bunch. So that's the second
So for
room. So
what
we that was Charybdis for the first,
for what tier?
high damage battleship, and
Because
then the second one.
so I just want to say I want to focus on the specific tier and then the different rooms. So in that
So
tier.
these are tier 4, tier 5.
Oh, okay. So we're going
There's
tier four
not
and
a
tier five.
ton of difference between tier 4, tier 5.
I understand number,
These
like
are
the
all terrible.
amount.
They're all
Yeah.
now the amounts change. So the only thing that changes between tier 4, tier 5 is now. I say it's not a huge difference most of the time. However, the tank can increase 50% in some of the rooms if you have a DPS sync, and the DPS you get can also increase significantly. Other times, it's really not a lot of difference, and it's kind of weird. It's very very random. They have made abyssals stupidly random to the point where they are largely unpredictable.
Okay.
So another one of the sites that affects me a little bit, but it's much less effective against the cruisers usually are the rogue drone sites. Okay, it's the frigate rogue drone sites. So there's Sparklance Teslas. And these guys they're small, they're fast, they do quite a bit of damage to me. Usually the cruisers, they rep through them no problem and then kill them. And they can use the towers to destroy them as well. For me, because they like to focus on one guy, and I'm a frigate with frigate amounts of health, they can be a little bit of a threat. But again, I usually just pop my ADC, and they stop being a threat. If I move the wrong guy first, they become a lot bigger of a threat because I don't have that ADC, but I do have ways of getting around that. You usually want to kill the one that is the strongest against your tank. So, for example, my Nurgles don't have a huge kinetic resist. So you want to kill the Strike Lance first. The Ember Lance, on the other hand, if there are Ember Lance, because it can be one damage type in here, then you don't really care about them. They do about a third the DPS to me as what the other ones do. So you can kind of take a little bit more risks, but it is still threatening.
Okay.
Then one of the DPS sync rooms is the Deep Watchers. They're in tier 4, there's 2 Deep Watchers. In tier 3 or tier 5, there's 3 Deep Watchers usually. Sometimes in tier 5 there's only 2. I again, the randomness they have made for what they throw out is fairly unpredictable. And it's just a DPS sync. The battleships don't hit you. The ships that come with them are small and easy to kill. It's a DPS race. If you have enough DPS, you're fine. If you don't have enough DPS, you're in trouble.
Yeah, and so that's actually something that's really important. So there are some sites that are just, DPS checks, and they'll just come out of nowhere sometimes.
Absolutely, absolutely. If you're doing tier 5 and you're not 600 DPS combined in some kind of way, you can end up in a lot of trouble. Nurgles, again, that's one of the reasons why I like them so much. If I lose a Nurgle early on, I'm not screwed by the DPS race rooms because of the ramp up that I get. It still gets a lot harder, but I'm not instantly, you are going to die.
Mm.
So the next one is, I like to call it the Benthic. That's the tier 5 name for it, but it is the Overseer. I'm not necessarily seeing it on this list. A lot of times it's just another DPS check up to tier 4. Even tier 4 is really not that bad. If you have enough DPS, you'll kill it. It's a lot like the Deep Watcher. If you get into tier 5, it can be a little bit different for frigates. I think most other tier 5 don't have to worry about it. It has a web up to 15 kilometers, and with Nurgles, I want to get close, so it gives me some issues sometimes. It still hits like a truck, but unlike Karen, it doesn't usually apply very well.
Okay.
Now, one we haven't talked about that is everybody's favorite is the regular Leshik room. And I have to say regular Leshik room because in tier 5s there is another Leshik room which we'll talk about after the regular Leshik room.
I believe we
So
used to call those the World Arc rooms.
so originally they were the World Arc rooms, then they became the Dreadnought rooms. In my stream, we've always called it the Cool Kid room, KKR, just cool with a K. And we went off track. That's okay. And Leshik's the Leshik room in some of them is absolutely fine. It's not a problem. They don't spawn with a lot of health. They're a little harder in gammas and firestorms because of the bonus shield and the bonus armor they get. They actually do have a little bit of health. If you're doing them in darks, they're actually one of the fastest rooms. Firestorms, they're a bit more of annoying a room. I don't like them as much. They don't cause me a lot of trouble, but I still find Firestorms worth doing out of it. Then, so the things you have to watch out for in there are blinding, starving, tangling, renewing. They have the same kind of things as what the Damavix do. But the renewing give a ton of health to the rest of them, so you want to kill them pretty quick. The blinding dampen you a lot, so you want to kill them pretty quick. The starving take away your cap, so you want to kill them pretty quick. You want to kill all 3 of those, but there's tangling in there that are going to web you, so you want to kill them pretty quick. And the problem is every target is almost a priority target in there.
Hmm. So in the I guess one thing to mention now that we've mentioned, I guess the dreadnought, the world arc uh room, is you can skip that one.
You can absolutely skip that one. You can go straight to the gate and jump out and not deal with that one, which I've seen a lot of cruisers do. I didn't realize how many people skip that room until I popped around and people were like, "Damn it, I got that stupid room again." It's like, really? That's my favorite 200 million ISK in 4 minutes. I mean, I'm not sure what you guys can do that makes 200 million ISK in 4 minutes, besides, I don't know, things that I do that I'm not telling you about. But that's my favorite room to do in 4 minutes that legitimately gets me ISK, not from other.
It is truly a task, yes.
However, if you're in a Gila, the problem with that is if you end up with blinding ships in there, then your targeting range is very, very short. And usually the strategy to get that cache before you jump out is to drop a mobile tractor at the gate and then blow up the cache from a distance. If there's blinding Leshiks there, then that's almost shot. Also, you have to be really careful because there are about 12 to 13 Leshiks in there. And if they get some damage on you, then you can be in a lot of trouble, especially in a cruiser, which is easier to hit. Uh, when they first came out with the room, CCP's like, yeah, so we threw this room in here and it's got some really good loot, but you might want to be careful because these guys will kill you if you don't grab the loot and run out. And I'm like, oh, sorry, I accidentally went in and killed everything. Oops, was I not supposed to do that? It,
Yeah.
it took me about 15 minutes, but my triple hawks cleared all of the Leshiks out of that room to no extra benefit, I might add.
So let's talk about so are there any other specific rooms that you want to discuss?
Okay. I'm just going to throw a couple out there right quick. There's fealties and Scylla rooms. They're generally not that hard. They do have webs and newts. You have to watch out. They can have an exorbitant amount of newts, in which case you really want to take the newts out. But other than that, they're pretty easy. There are Tezzera rooms. These are rogue drone battle cruisers. They hit like trucks. You don't want to be anywhere near them. However, they apply damage like a light neutron comet. If you're not within a very short range of them, they're really easy to kill. They like to pop drones though, so Gilas have to be a little careful with them. So there's that one. That one. We're not worried about those guys. We talked about Scylla's. That is really about it off the top of my head.
Okay. Cuz the one thing I wanted to I mean like r- r- going back to the whole thing about the blueprints, I wonder if you had noticed any, and I know this is anecdotal beyond belief, but I wonder if you'd notice any specific rooms, or not rooms, but like filaments or tiers of the abyss where blueprints have dropped more for like ships and such, or if it's all just sort of like evenly spread.
Okay, so it's fairly evenly spread. You don't get blueprints any better from any one room than another. Now, again, I run a lot of tier fives. My most of my ISK comes from typically about four things right now. The first is the survey databases. The second are the two crafting materials, and the last one is the RNG gods bestowing upon me a disintegrator book, because those are worth a fair bit, which has now been joined by the Kikimora blueprint, which is worth twice of what the large spec book is.
Yeah,
Uh,
actually, that's a fair point. We never covered the skill books.
so the skill books will drop in any tier, but what I'm going to talk about, we'll get to that in a sec, because there used to be a very different strategy that would make a lot more risk than what I do. but it was also based completely on RNG. So what I do, I don't get most of my ISK from anything other than crafting mats and red loot. Back once upon a time, a long, long time ago, when the destroyer and battle cruiser books first came out, and you can still do this to a degree, but if you're doing this, you're making less than me, but it's still probably easier than me. Is you can just blitz the tier 2 sites with frigates, and you're at the mercy of RNG. But because you get 3 times the loot, you still get 3 times the chance of getting the blueprints and stuff that spawn across all tiers. But you're getting a lot less of the guaranteed loot, like the red loot or the crafting mats.
Right. So yeah, so that makes sense. So the drop rate for the blues and the skill books is the same across all tiers. So or the blue loot and the skill books is the same across all tiers. So you can take what would work in a T4, T5, run them into T2 where it's not only much easier, but because of that it's also way faster, so you can blitz them, and then it's like you're just blitzing DED sites. You're just trying to get a nice payout in like you're just it's the law of numbers. You're just trying to run as many as you can so that you can, get more, jackpots basically.
So looking at it from that way, I've realized a little bit lately that CCP made it very, very, very much that you get 3 times the loot. So you kind of have to look at that a little bit. If you have one character and you want to run Abyssals, and you're like, do I want to run Cruiser by myself or Frigate with friends? Then part of what the answer you should look at is how often do you have 2 other friends to run Frigate Abyssals with? Right now, it's not looking like a whole lot, unfortunately. So that means that you can pick up your cruiser and go make your ISK in your cruiser regularly. But if you had a frigate, then it would only be intermediate that you'd be able to do it. Like you wouldn't be able to do it all of the time unless you had regular friends to do it. Now, if you're running tier 5, let's look at tier 5 firestorms. This is what I run. I make about 700 million ISK an hour, running 3 frigates. However, we'll bump that to 600 just because numbers. So 600 million ISK an hour. Now that's between 3 characters. That's 200 million ISK a character. If you're running them in the same speed in a Gila, I don't care what you want to call it, then you should be making 200 million ISK per hour, which is just 1/3, which is just the per character amount that I have.
Yeah, this is one of those. That's actually, good information. So yeah, that's one of those things, and that's why when I spoke about this, it's like you have to be multi-boxing is because, that's what allows you to do this, and we are speaking of a mid to high tier. I don't want to use the words mid to high tier, but I also don't want to use the words like mid to late game either, because there's no such thing in EVE Online. But it's the closest equivalent where you have I would say I'll use the words established. They're like a well,
Well, high tier
you
is
know.
not accurate. It's the highest tier of abyssals.
Well, right. So no, but what I'm saying, what I'm referring to is, like doing this with the triple boxing and the that's not some, and running these high level sites. That's not something that, an alpha who's like 6 months into the game can feasibly do and make what you're making. Um,
Oh wait, sorry. What? How long did you say? Did you say 6 months?
6 months, yeah.
Yeah. So about that. So an alpha couldn't know. However, I had now. There's a big difference between skill, and skill in Eve Online.
That's true.
You can have skill points. It does not mean you are skilled. And that's the great thing about Eve Online. It is like the one quote unquote pay to win game that you can pay to win. That does not mean you're actually going to win. You can lose a lot from that. we took a person who was in the game for 2 weeks, uh, Omega, not Alpha. That's the unfortunate thing, is this still really is not very Alpha friendly. We have a fit we're working on for that, but that still has to be fleshed out. But I'm going with a 2 week old Omega, and you would think a 2 week old Omega would generally not be able to do a whole lot. We took them in to tier 4 darks in
Was
Hawks.
this Nexus?
No, this was the Menace,
Oh, okay.
Rudy or Ricky, who has now. Give me 1 second. I'm just gonna see if okay. So he's not currently online. Give me 1 second. I'm just gonna search him.
Yeah, no problem. But yeah, so what I was trying to refer to is this is like, yeah, so there, if a brand new player specializes into it and is Omega, but again, they need the other two accounts, right? Or at least one other account to be able to do that, and that requires either, I mean, it always, of course, there is significant financial investment to do it, either through the real world, or of course, you wait and you build yourself up in the game, and then you get to that point where you have the second account, and I would call that an established player,
Of course, of course. Now,
a mid-tier
in
established
this
player.
case, I was giving a little bit of a break on people in my corporation who wanted to run this, and Menace ended up getting his own little exclamation mark command in my chat for a while because I lent him enough stuff to get started with a hawk. Now, the hawk he was running was not very high tiered, and we carried him a bit because he was maybe 3 weeks old at the time.
Only so much
So
you can do.
he got I gave him a few billion worth of skill injectors. So I think it was 2 or 3 large skill injectors, so he could get up to a reasonable amount of DPS and be able to fly the hawk. And we took him into tier 4 darks, and he did perfectly fine in tier 4 darks, especially for a 2 3 week old character. And he made, and that's the thing with tier 4s, which again I think we can get alphas into, but we're really early on in this. You can make hundreds of millions of ISK in a night. We're going to try it with cheese bills. Tier 4s will probably be out of the alpha range, but they should be fine for the omega range. And they should be able to do tier 3s, which will be a lot less ISK, but you know what? Still a couple 100 million ISK in a night to get them into the Hawks would go a long way. So we started Menace off 2 weeks in. He started 2 weeks, first character, first account, and we had him running Fleet Abyss, and he made hundreds of millions of ISK, and then hundreds of millions of ISK, and then hundreds of millions of ISK. And he had me paid off in about 3 days. He had a couple things he won from some other streamers as well. But he was paid off and in the black in under a week.
That's impressive.
And now he has been playing for under 3 months, and he has 2 accounts that he's dual boxing Nurgles in.
Yeah. I mean, if you set yourself up right. So yeah, this is definitely totally a thing. So yeah, it is quite impressive.
Now, that being said, I've taken other people in, and it can just be with frigates, luck is a thing, unfortunately. Most of the time, it's fine. Other times, it's not. I lost 2 Nurgles last night. I still replaced them with what I made last night, so it wasn't really a big issue. Guarv, okay, I haven't seen him in here. That's not how you say his name, but I call him Guarv anyway, and he doesn't care. He was running frigates with me. We were running Hawks. We were in the last room, and we had a Karen, Cryptus Tyrnos. And he was flying a little. He didn't like being near the edge, so he kind of flew a little bit away, and then he'd come back a little bit. And Karen had 10 seconds left before we killed her. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to start heading towards the exit, going to start heading towards the exit. 5 seconds left. Okay, we're on our way out. And she looked at Guarav and went, nope, and one shot at him. And he's in a pod all of a sudden, and Karen dies. And I'm like, what the hell just happened? Like, did you fly out? And then when I went and grabbed his loot, I wasn't taking any damage, so he didn't fly out. She one shotted him. Full shield to zero structure.
Yeah, just wrecking shot, man. Sometimes it just do be like that.
There's a big reason why Charybdis is the most feared room in there. And if you ever see people complain about things, it's like I've gotten my third Charybdis room in.
Yeah. I mean, it's a thing. I've run into the Charybdis in a T1, and I almost died. I was definitely on like 10% hull, thanks to that wrecking shot. Um, luckily enough, I was able to get her down before she was able to get off another one. But yeah, it was a thing. It happens. It happens even in tier 1. So it's not just like a tier 5 thing. It's an all tiers thing. Um. So let's see. Well, so you mentioned the ISK per hour. And yeah, there's definitely some advantages and disadvantages to the frigates. I guess that is there anything else that you want to cover?
So there are two advantages to frigates and one disadvantage to frigates.
Hmm.
Okay, kind of along that. We'll talk about it anyway. The one of the advantages of frigates is that it's a much lower skill requirement because it's frigates. So you don't need to have max cruiser skills, max medium weapon skills, things like that. You just need to have turret skills for small turrets, which really doesn't take a whole lot to get into. So that is one of the bonuses. The other bonus is with three frigates, they tend to be a much cheaper composition per frigate than what it would be for a cruiser. So a lot of times, the Gilas that you see going into tier 5s, they tend to be worth like 3 to 4 billion with implants. My frigates tend to be worth about 700 million ISK each with implants. And if I lose one in the abyss, that doesn't mean the other two are going to die. Again, yesterday I lost two Nurgles in two separate rooms. I still looted them and got out with everything.
Yeah, I mean that's not bad. Um,
Uh, you have the advantage of having all three ships in one room. It's easier to concentrate on three being in one room than where, if somebody's multi-boxing missions, they might be running two different missions and have two different things to pay attention to. Mine are still all in the same room. I can look up and be like, that guy should not be 20 kilometers away from me and move towards him or move him up or find out what I'm doing wrong.
all I heard was a shot at Hatless. No, I'm kidding. We love Hatless.
Hateless. Okay, I'm going to take a shot at Hateless just because that's fun. Oh, actually, no, this is a very good point. Never mind. I'm taking a shot at Hateless. That's a very good point. Okay. So I was running my Hawks and Darks, and Hateless is like, hey, why don't you use these implants? Now, it was a mid grade set of implants, and if you've ever looked at a full set of mid grade implants, they cost a billion ISK. I don't like running mid grades unless I'm in an actual Gila because it you're already running 3 billion. You may as well throw one more billion on top of that. But for frigates, I don't like running mid grades. The mid grade set costs more than my frigates do. But he's like, hey, why don't you throw these on? You get a smaller signature radius. Nothing can hit you. You will be unstoppable in the abyss. You cannot die. Your first mistake going into the abyss is thinking you cannot die. There are situations where it's very likely you're not going to die, but you should never go into the abyss thinking you are invulnerable. It is not really a thing. And he lost them a week later.
Yeah, so that's definitely one of the things is we can sit here and talk about fittings and strategy all we want, but like fundamentally at the end of the day, you will lose a ship. Um, and it's just one of those aspects of it is just the aspect of Eve. You don't expect to be 100% safe at any given point in time. There will be one day where that ship that you're flying is going to explode, whether because of your pilot error, whether because of external factors that you didn't take into account. It will happen, and it will die, and you will feel like crap, and then you'll just have to get over it, and just realize this is part of the game. Just go get a new one, keep going, and that's why I focus on ISK per hour so much, is because especially when doing very, very high tier destruction is almost guaranteed style gameplay. like burner missions, like the Abyss, like invasions, I focus on the ISK per hour because it is the difference between being able to pay for it when the inevitability happens of your ship getting destroyed, or just being locked out of the content. And that is why I focus on it so much. But not because it's about making the money to go do whatever it is I want. Is because I want to be able to make sure that this is a sustainable act. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely. So I'm just going to grab something since we started talking about this per hour. Give me 1 second here.
Abyss Event TL, yeah. I think I've heard of
So
this.
the first time that I
Mm-hmm.
went onto the Abyss Eve NT site, which you can use to track your abyssal runs. It's a fairly new site. I joined it on the second or the 5th of February of 20.
As for reference, that is March 19th. So
So we're talking about a month and a half ago. And just give me 1 second here. I'm just going to pull a graph out because I mean, what's Eve Online if you don't have a graph somewhere?
yay stats.
And it just requires me to put stats somewhere. Sorry, just give me 1/2 second here.
So yeah, this is definitely one of those things. Uh, and so this website, because I'm looking at it right now, tracks all runs. This looks like cruiser though.
Oh no, you can absolutely do frigates in here as well.
Okay.
And there are my current stats since the 5th of February 2020, with today being the 19th of March.
Hmm. That's really interesting. So I'm just looking through the numbers. You have the
The one
averaging.
that should stand out should be the total loot since the 5th of February is 51,866 million ISK worth in
Hmm.
347 runs.
So it looks like I'm just going through. It looks like as the tiers go up higher, you start to see frigates start to make significantly more. But it's not exactly the same as the next tier up. So one of the interesting things is that um tier so one of the things that people say, especially in the communication, is running a frigate tier 2 is the same as running a tier 3 in a cruiser in terms of loot. That doesn't seem to be correct. It actually seems to be slightly below. So it still is better to be running a higher. If you can run a higher tier cruiser, it is still better to be running a higher tier cruiser until you reach tier 4,
I would agree with that.
tier
And
3,
I've,
tier
I've been
4.
trying to talk some people into that as well. Where if you can run tier 5 cruiser, which tier 5 cruiser is, again, it's higher tier, you have to be ready for it. You can't do it with too low skills. But you know what? You can grind tier 3, you can get up to those skills. You can grind tier 4, you can get up to those skills. And then you can grind tier 5. Tier 3 is fairly easy, especially in cruiser. However, with what we're working on, alphas might be able to grind tier 3 in 23 million ISK ships and tier 4 in 60 million ISK ships for omegas, which don't require a ridiculous amount of skill.
Hmm.
But we're in the infancy of trying to figure that out.
Yeah. So it just seems like the like once you hit tier 4, it's just I mean, from what the statistics show, and again, these statistics aren't particularly um, old, but from what the statistics show, at least from what we're seeing, is once you hit tier 4, then even tier 4 and frigates seem to outpace tier 5 cruisers. So, and that is significant.
Oh, absolutely. And again, it's why I'm trying to encourage people, if they can run tier 4, tier 5, it's not a bad thing to do in cruisers.
Yeah, exactly.
And if it saves them from having to try to find a group to run frigates, it's especially useful for them to run that way.
Yeah, it's what. Oh, go ahead.
Again, the biggest thing is the if you're getting into a Gila, you are now risking probably at least a 600 million to 2 billion ISK ship, and a lot of people can't afford stuff like that.
That's true. And so this goes into, and this is actually goes into one of my one of the things that I talk about when I'm speaking to people about running in wormhole space is, people say, oh, well, wormholders make 2 billion isk per hour, blah blah blah. Yeah, for an hour or two at most, right? And then you have to wait a week for that to happen again. And so, and then now divide that down, right? And suddenly that 2 bill isk per hour doesn't look so hot anymore. Um,
Well,
and so
yeah,
this is
that's
one of
the
those
other thing. I
things.
could run these 12 hours straight 7 days a week, right?
Right. And so when somebody is like, oh, well, Frigate Abyss sounds amazing, I'm going to go run Frigate Abyss with some guys. Well, you're only going to be able to do it for X amount of period of time until one of those guys has to get off, and however long that may be, 2-3 hours. And if these statistics are to be believed, and, say like they're still new to it and they can make it tier 4, then that's, if you're only able to run 2-3 hours, that's 300 million ISK in 3 hours. That's 100 mil an hour. That's not bad, right?
Oh, it's really not. And like
But
I was saying, like we can almost do that
that's
with
divided among
23
all three
million ISK
players.
ships.
Am I to assume that that 100 mil an hour is split evenly among the 3 people, so it ends up being like 33 million an hour or something like
Of
that?
course, of course.
Right. And so then you really think about it, and you're like, wait a minute, 33 million an hour? Because there's other things that'll give you 33 million an hour, and I can think of a few things off the top of my head. I mean, exploration missions, mining. Um, so it all in perspective, right? It when you're looking at it, but then what if you're able to do things like, you know, if you're able to do things like a solo cruiser abyss, then you're able to go to tier 4s, 45 million ISK an hour. I mean, that's
It would be more than 45 million an hour. So if we take a quick look, I lost a second. So you have to remember that these runs take usually 15 minutes. If they're taking longer than 15 minutes, then somebody's doing. A tier 3 Gila can get looks like probably in around 60 million ISK an hour.
Am I reading these statistics incorrect? Average loot per tier, right? I'm not seeing
Yeah,
that
that's
as an
average loot
hour
per
rating.
tier.
Got
Yeah.
it. Got it. So
Now that's for one set of filaments, which is 15 minutes. You can run 4 of those.
for that, so if I were to then do the calculation again, I take the 100 mil per hour, 15 minutes, so 400 mil an hour,
133 an hour
133 an hour
per character.
per character, right? Per character. So 133 times say like you have 3 hours to work with your buddies, and that's a lot of time for most people. But say you have like 3 hours a night or something like that. I mean, that's 400 million ISK, a day. That's
Which isn't about where that was about how much I was handing out running tier 4 darks or tier 4 firestorms for when I was running the open fleets. I've cut down a little bit on open fleets. I'm trying to change the focus. because I think that people are, because actually, let's take a look at some more numbers because we have them here. So running a cruiser by yourself in tier 5 is 83 a run, which works out to about 320 million to yourself with a cruiser per hour. Where we just said
Not
for tier
counting
4,
jackpots.
not counting jackpots.
Yeah.
Actually, no, that is counting jackpots because that's an average for everything, right?
Oh, okay.
Where for frigates, you get 33 million or 33 per run, which is we just said 120 an hour.
That's
So
tier 4 though.
that's tier 4. That because that's what we're talking about. We were talking
Yeah.
about the lower tier, right?
Right, right.
Because it's really easy to get into tier 4 abyss. A lot of people look at it and they're like, "How is this easy?" But it's actually really not that bad. You can take some new players, and we're again, this is a bit of a work in progress. I've taken new players in though, and they've been able to run and contribute to these and make that much. Uh, but there's no way they'd be able to take a 2.5 billion Esquil into a tier 5. But if they can do the tier 5, they're definitely worth doing.
Interesting. Yeah, so and so this is one of those things. So now that we're understanding the numbers. So yeah, this is totally a thing. And this Abyss event is actually a really good website. I like this.
There are a few flaws with it, same as any website. I realize that I can't edit my runs, and once or twice I may have jettisoned all of my filaments that I was holding onto for the next runs and counted them in there, but or oh, I had extra loot on this other guy that didn't get put in there, so it probably evens out. But overall, it's a really good website. I like it.
Yeah. And yeah, it's really interesting to see all recorded filament types, all recorded tiers, so like the most common being exotic and the most common being tier 4, so or tier 5. So like exotic tier 5 seem to be like the most common, and this is just show statistics for things.
I also may like that I'm about 6.8% of their total of saved runs.
Well, I mean, it's important to have good data. The more data, the better, and compilers like this is actually really important. Oops. Click the button. So yeah, I mean, this is actually really interesting. Is there anything else that you wanted to cover on the subject of Frigate Abyss?
I think we got everything.
Okay.
There's still always new things coming out. So and also I'll tell anyone who ever comes into my stream this is I have my way of running the abyss. You may have your way running the abyss. It doesn't mean that one way is right and one way is wrong in any kind of way. Which is especially important since even though I've run a lot of Hawk Abyss in the past, I now realize that I don't like my Hawk Fit because it does not have enough cap regen, and I'm probably going to change that around and still never use it again because I'm changing the meta on how I'm doing that as well. So just be aware that if something works for you and you like something, and this applies to almost anything in the game, do what you enjoy doing. Just because somebody else likes the way something else works better or runs it faster, if you're enjoying what you do, you're doing it right.
Yeah. So there's that. Let's see. We're at an hour 33. Oh, we normally set these up for 2 hours, but that's nice how we're cutting it down to an hour 33. I guess we'll open it up to questions for the next few minutes in chat, and then uh, we'll sign off. Still missing the mad ISK part. so, so one of the things that I like to do at the end of these is talk about how this impacts the EVE economy as a whole, and so the Abyss has been something that is very secular from a lot of the game, but you're starting to see it more in guys like Lokoval are the ones who build a lot of the ships that you guys use, especially since uh the Vedmeks, the Dracovics, the Lesheks. And so when you look at wormhole space, right, there's a potential that a lot of those Dracovics that are flying out there in wormhole space now because these new doctrines are Locavals, Dracovics, and that's something to keep in mind. And so every single Triglavian ship you see flying in space has had some abyssal runner be part of that process. And so it's one of those really cool things to look at where you have these really awesome cool looking ships, and there's some dude who came in to into the abyss, went feared ran the storm, feared the storm, got his loot out, and then passed it on to whoever ended up uh making the ship. So it's really cool just to see kind of like those little impacts left and right.
So to answer Market Tycoon, since he's the one that we had here, about it being mad ISK, he's like, I've seen 150 million ISK per hour before. And that's absolutely true. If you're running triple box Abyss, however, you're hitting up closer to 800 million ISK per hour. Yes, it's with three characters, but you can do it all at the same time with those three characters, which running three burners all at the exact same time is probably a little harder of a thing to do.
See, hateless gaming. Uh,
Hateless is still, well,
you
I'm a
still
bit of
want to
an exception to the rule a lot of the time. Hateless is also an exception to the rule a lot of the
yeah, no, I mean, hateless is 100% an exception to the rule. I mean, that's just his thing. I mean, to be fair, I mean, I'd be in his position too. Like, it's just one of those things. Being a long-time StarCraft player, you just kind of like you want 1,000 things to be happening at once. Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Do what's fun. Do what's fun and what makes you money. There's plenty of one of the things that I always say is there are plenty of ivory towers to climb in every part of the game, from high sec to null sec to low sec to wormhole space. You just pick you got to pick one. You can't do all of them at the same time because it won't work. You just got to pick one, and once you get close to the top, or you get the top of that that ivory tower, then you can go to another one. Make sure that at least, especially for that first one, that you choose one that you enjoy, because you're going to be there a while. That's just one of those things. And Hateless enjoys his burner missions. He enjoys his triple boxing burners, and that's why he's able to go there. And Lokoval enjoys his triple boxing abyss. That's why he's able to go there. I enjoy my market stuff and my wormhole stuff. That's why I'm able to go to those heights.
So I'm going to throw one thing out there, and that is that, again, I'm not saying there's a wrong way to do this. If you find a way that works, feel free to go with that way. But if you're going to come and look for a fit, the first thing I'm going to tell you is you should run Aguila in Cruiser Abyss. If you want to run Cruiser Abyss, run Aguila. If you say, I don't like drones and I don't like missiles, and I want to run an armor turret ship, I'll be like, I can't help you. We haven't really found anything great for armor turrets. It's the worst matchup. The easiest thing to take into Abyss is Aguila. If you can afford a decent Gila, you're probably already an Omega. And if you're not, then you should be, because if you're able to lose that expensive of a ship and have two spares, that's about what it costs you to become an Omega anyway.
Yeah, the abyssals are definitely a great intersection of fun and ISK. All right, let's see. Where are we now? Hour 38. Yeah, okay. So we'll start wrapping things up here. Thanks to my guest Lokoval for coming out. And where can they find you? What are you up to? Where can they find you?
That means I have to copy and paste stuff. So first of all, we have my Twitch. Lately, I've been streaming in the evenings. I usually start up around 2200 Eve time. I just absolutely had a lot of fun messing with a jackpot draw that I've been working on. If you're interested in it, feel free to pop in my stream. I've been streaming most days. My schedule has been kind of a little wonky, but it's just mostly been almost every day around 2200 Eve time. I also have two in-game channels. One is, which I love that it highlights that. Anyway, one is my Team Loki channel that is where I run my Fleet Abyssals from. Again, I've kind of taken that a little bit to the back burner, but it might come back. I'm not 100% sure yet. And the other is my Local the Nub channel, which is just my original channel that I started with. I'll get my Discord up here as well. We did do a thing with a loot box the other day, which involved people shooting people in the face, and that was a lot of fun. That might come up again.
Yeah. So, and I assume you have a Twitter as well.
Yeah, I want to talk about that. I don't use it enough.
Fair enough.
I'm terrible on Twitter. I
I don't blame you. Same.
absolutely.
Same.
However, my Discord's there, and I pay a lot of attention to my Discord. If you ever have any questions, I'm more than happy to help you. If I can't help you, I will try to send you in a direction that I can. Um, and I check that fairly often, so that will be available. Um, but yeah, no, absolutely, and of course, Maloro, which is growing incessantly larger every time I look at it. And yeah, I do a lot with these abyssal things. I can help a fair bit. If I can't, I know the people that have the answers.
Nice. Yeah, and I'm just I'm doing things over on Twitch, twitch.tv/Lichgrave. You guys know where I'm at. YouTube channel Lichgrave. There'll be content coming out actually there for Evil Online soon, so be it paying attention to that. And you guys can listen to this podcast on the TIS podcast, where you got on the TIS podcast channel, which is where most people listen to podcasts. So check your common podcast listening sources, and you'll most likely be able to find us there. As well as the VOD here on Twitch for the next month. So, without further ado, that I do believe is it. Looking for people to raid now.
You people have yourselves
If we
an
can get a raid.
amazing day. And if you have any questions, of course, feel free to pester.
Hold on, let me see if we can get a raid. If not, that's okay. What's the...
Torvald's on right now. Tammy is on right now.
Yeah, let's see who's on. Torvald's on. Love Torvald. Great guy. Tammy's great. Doing missions. But you know what? So we're... Yeah. Let's drop you guys with Torvald, who's actually doing Abyss PvP. Yeah, nice. All right, guys. Thank you all so much for coming out. It was an amazing time to sit here with Lokoval and talk Abyssal Frigates. Medisk will be back again, and we will have more guests on Talking Abyss for the next few times, but, we'll see where it goes. For now, I thank you all so much for coming out, so much for watching. Lokoval, thank you again for coming out.
Yeah, not a problem. Remember, guys, a lot of people tell you to fly safe. I'm going to tell you something different. I'm going to tell you to fly fun, because it's all right to lose shit.
Yep. And as always, guys, take it easy, and we'll catch you next time. Peace. Have a great day. Stay safe. All that. And I'll catch you guys later. Let's go see what Torvald's up to.